You hear it before you see it, the slow turn of wheels on an empty road, hooves in the dark, the faint sound of mourning where no funeral should be. Across old lanes, corpse roads, church paths and cemetery tracks, people have told stories of phantom hearses and ghostly funeral processions appearing just before death. Sometimes they pass in silence. Sometimes they stop at a gate. And sometimes, most terrifying of all, the funeral they seem to be carrying has not happened yet.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
You're great at protecting your data, but lots of places could still expose you to identity theft.
I thought it was safe.
If that happens, LifeLock gives you a U.S.-based restoration agent who will stick by your side from start to finish. Phone calls, filing documentation, preparing insurance claims, your agent handles it all. In fact, we're so confident restoration is guaranteed or your money back. Isn't it nice to have someone like that on your side? Save up to 30% your first year at LifeLock.com/special offer. Terms apply.
Having the right people in your corner for life's biggest milestones makes all the difference. Like a friend who's there when you're house hunting or checking out a new ride, State Farm is there too, helping you choose the coverage you need. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you along the way. And with so many coverage options, it's nice knowing you have help choosing a plan that fits your needs, so you can continue celebrating all of life's milestones. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Morning people wake up for peace and quiet. McDonald's breakfast people, we wake up for the sweet rush of getting that warm, delicious breakfast right before it ends.
Hotcakes, sausage patty, hash browns, scrambled eggs, biscuit, real butter and syrup. You know how our big breakfast got its name, and you know where your whole family can share one for just $6. McDonald's. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hello, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Toby.
And welcome to the Whispering Woods podcast. This episode is all about
Hearses, funeral processions, and corpse roads.
Yeah, so they all kind of come together, all right? They may sound like they don't. Do you know what corpse road is?
No.
Ah, then you are in for a treat, my boy. But first of all, we have a new patron.
Lucy Coulson.
Yeah, hi Lucy. Thank you so much for coming over and supporting the podcast. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can visit patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, where we have a number of tiers where you can listen ad-free and in advance. And we are also on Apple Premium. Right, I made that as short as possible. Are you ready for the story?
Yes, I am.
At first, it's only a low sound, somewhere beyond the bend in the road. Something heavy, moving through the dark with the slow certainty of a thing that knows exactly where it's going. Then come the hoofbeats, followed by the faint suggestion of singing carried on the air. By the time the shape appears, black against the road and moving with purpose, there is already something wrong with it. No one speaks, no lanterns swing, no driver turns his head. The procession passes as if it belongs to another hour entirely. And only when it is gone do you realise there were no footsteps or voices, and no sound but the wheels. In the old stories, death does not always arrive suddenly. Sometimes it sends the carriage ahead. Across Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Brittany, England, and far beyond, there are stories of funeral processions that should not be there. Black coaches heard at midnight, hearses seen only in mirrors, lines of mourners moving silently along country roads, and coffins carried for people who have not yet died. These stories are known by many names. Some call them phantom hearses or death coaches. Others speak of spectral funerals, corpse road hauntings, second sight processions, or funerals seen before their time. The names shift from place to place, but the shape of the story remains strangely consistent. The witness hears something approaching on the road. Wheels on stone, hooves on a lane, chains, bells, keening, singing, or the low rumble of something heavy drawing nearer. And then the apparition appears, either as a dark coach, a funeral cart, a line of mourners, or sometimes nothing visible at all. Only the sound of the funeral passing through the night. What makes these legends different from ordinary ghost stories is that the phantom hearse is rarely just a remnant of the past. It is not usually a spirit replaying its own death, or a figure trapped inside an old house. More often, it's an omen, a messenger, a sign that death has already set out on the road and is moving towards someone still living. In many of these traditions, the route matters as much as the apparition itself. These ghostly processions often follow old lanes, church paths, bridges, graveyard tracks, estate roads or corpse roads. The real routes once used to carry bodies from remote homes to burial grounds. Long before funeral cars and organised undertakers, death had to be physically moved through the landscape, with coffins carried across fields, through villages and over water, until they reached a churchyard with the right to receive them. That is the world that the phantom hearse belongs to. Not simply a ghost vehicle, but death given shape and direction. In Ireland, one of the most famous forms is the coist bodder, often translated as the silent coach or the death coach. It's said to travel at night, sometimes drawn by black horses, sometimes heard before it's seen, and sometimes linked with other Irish death omens, such as the banshee or the headless dullahan. In Wales, the emphasis often falls less on the vehicle and more on the funeral itself. The toily or phantom funeral was said to appear before a real death, showing the route, the mourners, the coffin, or the sound of a burial procession before the event had happened. In Scottish and Gaelic traditions, similar experiences were often understood through second sight, especially deaths and funerals before they occurred. A person might see mourners crossing a path, recognise faces among them, or even witness their own funeral before their death. And in Brittany, the tradition darkens around the figure of Ankow, a deathly collector who travels with a cart or coach, moving along the roads of the dead. All of these traditions speak the same symbolic language. Death travels. It has a route. It may be heard before it is seen, and once it has started moving, it may not be possible to stop. In some Irish stories, people were told that if they heard the death coach approaching, they should open the gates so it could pass freely. The logic was simple. If the coach continued on its way, the household might be spared. But if it stopped outside the house, or seemed to call there, then those inside had reason to fear that death had arrived for someone under that roof. That detail shows how these beliefs worked in real life. They were not only stories told for entertainment beside the fire. They came with rules, warnings, and ritual behaviour. Do not obstruct the funeral. Do not answer certain calls. Do not stand in the path. Do not ignore wheels at night. Open the gate, let it pass, and do not invite it to stop. This is one of the reasons phantom funeral legends survive so well. They gave people a way to understand the unbearable uncertainty of death. In communities where illness could move quickly, accidents were common, and explanations were limited, omens offered a dreadful kind of structure. They did not make death kinder, but they made it readable. But there is another reason these stories endure, and it may be the most unsettling one. Even now, long after corpse roads have fallen out of daily use, and horse-drawn hearses have mostly disappeared, people still report the same pattern. A black vehicle appears in the rearview mirror. A funeral party crosses a bridge in silence. A line of mourners vanishes near an old cemetery. A hearse follows too closely, then disappears when the driver pulls aside. The details have modernised, but the structure has not changed very much at all. The old coach becomes a black car. The corpse road becomes a back lane. The second sight funeral becomes something glimpsed in a mirror during an ordinary drive. And the question remains exactly the same. Did someone see a ghost? Did they see a warning? Or did they, for one brief moment, see the road that death was already taking? In Ireland, one of the most feared versions of this tradition was known as the Coes Bodher. Sometimes witnesses hear wheels, sometimes hooves, sometimes the terrible rumble of a carriage moving over rough ground. What makes it silent is not that it makes no sound, but that it belongs to a world beyond ordinary human calling. It does not answer. It does not stop because someone shouts. It does not explain itself. It comes when it comes. And once it's been sent, the old belief was that it could not return empty. The Irish death coach belongs to a wider world of death omens. It's sometimes linked to the banshee, whose cry was said to warn certain families of an approaching death, and sometimes to the Dullahan, the headless rider or coachman who carries his own severed head and calls the names of those marked to die. These figures are not identical, but they share the same dreadful territory. They do not simply haunt the dead, they announce them. The coach is usually described as dark, heavy, and old-fashioned, drawn by black horses and moving at night. In some stories, the horses are visible. In others, only their hoofbeats are heard. And in others, the witnesses hear the wheels pass so close that they expect to see the carriage at any moment. only for the road to remain empty. The mind does what it always does with sound in darkness. It builds an image. A road, a horse, a wheel, a driver. A box at the back that no one wants to name too soon. In County Clare folklore, the death coach appears again and again as a sign that someone is about to die. The folklorist Thomas Johnson Westrop collected several accounts from the region. And what stands out is how practical the stories are. They're not told like distant fairy tales. They're attached to houses, roads, family names, dates and local memory. In one kind of account, a coach is heard coming along the road before a death in the household. In another, people hear the carriage pass where no carriage could have passed. In another, the sound is so physical and convincing that listeners expect to see horses and wheels, yet nothing appears. The belief was not merely that the coach existed, but that it followed rules. One of the most chilling of these was that gates should be opened if the death coach was heard approaching. The reason was simple enough to remember and frightening enough to obey. If the coach could pass through without obstruction, it might continue on its way. But if it stopped at the gate, if it seemed unable to move on, then those inside might fear it had business with the house. That is where this folklore becomes intimate. A death coach on an empty road is frightening, but a death coach at the gate is personal. It's not come for the village in general. It's not come as a vague symbol of mortality. It has paused outside one home, one family, one room where someone may be already lying ill, without knowing that the road has begun to gather around them. In some Irish retellings, the coach appears around midnight. Midnight has always belonged easily to death folklore. Not because people truly thought clocks controlled the supernatural, but because the hour itself feels suspended. It's neither yesterday nor today. It's a threshold, and threshold moments are where omens gather. There are accounts in Irish tradition where the death coach is heard by more than one person, which gives the story a particular power. One person hearing wheels at night might be explained away as fear, or the strange behaviour of sound in rural places. But when a family hears it together, when several people sit up and ask the same question, the experience becomes harder to dismiss. And then later, when a death follows, the sound is remembered differently. It's no longer just a noise in the night. It becomes the first moment of the death story. That's how omens work. They often become clear only afterwards. A bird at the window, a candle going out, a knock at the door with no one outside, a coach on the road before the sick person dies. At the time, the sign may be confusing, even easy to ignore. But once grief arrives, memory goes back and gathers everything that came before it, searching for warnings. In Wales, the ghostly funeral often appears not as a single coach, but as a procession. The tradition is sometimes called the toily or phantom funeral, and its central idea is simple enough to understand and difficult enough to forget. Before a death has happened, before the body has been laid out, before the mourners have gathered in ordinary life, someone sees or hears the funeral already taking place. A road is empty and then it's not. A lane that should belong only to the living is suddenly filled with figures moving slowly toward a churchyard. There may be mourners, bearers, a coffin, or the sound of wheels and footsteps. In some accounts, the witness recognises faces among the procession, while in others, the people are only shadowy forms, more impression than flesh, passing as if the world has thinned for a moment. The Welsh tradition is especially powerful because it does not always depend on seeing the dead themselves. Instead, it asks the witness to recognise the shape of a funeral. That's enough. The slow movement, the hush around it, the direction of travel, and the terrible sense that this is not a memory, but a preview. Jonathan Seredic Davies, writing about folklore in West and Mid Wales, described these phantom funerals as shadowy processions that foretold real ones. In one account from Pembrokeshire, told to him in the early 20th century, a witness described meeting a strange funeral party in the road and later learning that an actual funeral followed the same route. The important thing in these stories is not always that every detail can be pinned down like a court record, but that the pattern was familiar enough for people to understand what had been seen. The idea sits close to other Welsh death omens, including corpse candles, ghostly lights, and strange sounds that seem to announce mourning before anyone in the house has died. The toll-leath was sometimes understood as a warning sound before death, while the sidhiraeth was associated with a mournful cry, a kind of death wail heard before tragedy. Together, these beliefs created a world in which death rarely arrived without sending something ahead of it. Sometimes that something was a light, sometimes it was a voice, sometimes it was the full procession, already walking the road. There is emotional logic to that. In communities where funeral routes were known, where neighbours would have understood exactly which path a coffin must take from a house to a graveyard, the sight of a funeral procession did not need explanation. It was social knowledge made supernatural. Everyone knew what such a procession meant, and everyone knew where it was going. So when a phantom funeral appeared, it was not random. It borrowed the most recognisable ritual the community had for death and placed it in the wrong moment. One Welsh oral tradition preserved through Museum Wales tells of a man who encountered a phantom funeral on a narrow road and had to press himself against the hedge to let it pass. This detail is wonderfully unsettling because it is so physical. It's not a vague feeling or a distant vision on a hill. It's a procession close enough to force a living person out of its path. The dead, or perhaps the future dead, take up room on the road. In many ways, the Welsh phantom funeral is more disturbing than the Irish death coach, because it brings the community into the omen. A coach may come for one person, hidden inside a closed vehicle. A procession shows the social aftermath of death. It shows the mourners en route, the coffin, the solemnity, and sometimes the faces of those who will soon be walking there in daylight. The phantom hearse and the spectral funeral do not belong only to one country, or even to one kind of haunting. They belong to a much older relationship between death and the road. Before modern funeral homes, before motor hearses, before death was made quiet and professional, and kept mostly behind closed doors, the dead had to be carried. A body might begin its final journey in a remote cottage, and from there it had to be taken to the proper churchyard, sometimes across miles of difficult ground. The path might cross fields, rivers, moorland, before it reached the place where burial was allowed. These routes were often known as corpse roads, coffin roads, lichways, bier roads, funeral paths or churchways. And although the names changed from region to region, the purpose remained the same. They were the roads by which the dead left the world of the living. A road used once is only a road. A road used generation after generation to carry the dead becomes something else. It becomes a place where grief has passed in procession, where prayers have been spoken, where mourners have walked in silence, where coffins have paused on stones or at gates, where the living have turned back and the dead have gone on. Even without anything supernatural, that kind of repeated use changes how people imagine a landscape. In England and wider Britain, many ghostly funeral stories attach themselves to these old burial routes. The haunting is not always a named apparition, and there may be no dramatic coachman, no flaming horses, and no clear figure of death seated at the front. Instead, the road itself becomes the supernatural object. People hear footsteps. They see lights moving toward a churchyard. They glimpse a line of mourners crossing a track and vanishing into trees. They hear the sound of wheels or the creak of a cart or the murmur of a funeral service carried on wind. The route remembers what it was used for. This is the simplest and perhaps the most powerful way to understand Corpse Road folklore. These are not random hauntings scattered across empty countryside. They are stories that sit exactly where death once moved in public ritual form. A landscape has been given a memory, and the ghostly procession is the shape that the memory takes. In Brittany, this idea becomes even darker through the figure of Ankou, one of the most striking death figures in European folklore. The Ankou is often described as a personification or servant of death, a skeletal or shadowed figure who travels with a cart, collecting the souls of those about to die. In some traditions, the Ankou is the last person to have died in a parish during the previous year, now bound to serve death until replaced by another. In others, he is simply the dark driver of the death cart, moving along roads that belong to the dead more than the living. The Briton death cart is not exactly the same as the Irish death coach or the Welsh phantom funeral, but it speaks the same language. Wheels in the night, a vehicle connected with death. A route that matters, a warning that someone's time is near. A cart of Ankou is often imagined as old, rough, creaking and unmistakable, with an axle that screams or complains as it moves. In some stories, people hear it before they see it, and that sound alone is enough to fill them with dread. The cart is not coming from nowhere. It's coming from the place all death comes from, and it's travelling towards someone who may not yet know they have been chosen. In the Highlands and Islands of Scotland and later in Gaelic communities overseas, this same tradition often appears through second sight rather than a named coach or cart. A person gifted or burdened with second sight might see a funeral before it happened, or glimpsed mourners travelling a road in advance of death. In Nova Scotia, where Scottish Gaelic tradition survived among immigrant communities, collectors recorded similar accounts of people seeing funeral processions before they occurred. This tells us that these legends were never only about one famous haunted lane or one dramatic local ghost. They were part of a way of understanding death itself. The dead did not simply vanish, they travelled, and some people, whether through second sight, misfortune, sensitivity or chance, were believed to see that journey before anyone else. Once you understand that, the phantom hearse becomes less like a novelty and more like one expression of a much larger fear, the fear that death is already in motion. And perhaps that's why modern versions of the story still feel so recognisable. A person today may not believe in Ankou. They may not know the history of corpse roads or second sight. They may have no language for death or omens at all. But if they are driving alone at night, and a black hearse appears in the mirror, close behind them on an empty road, only to vanish when they pull aside. They understand the feeling immediately. They may not call it folklore, they may not call it a warning, but for a moment they feel the old fear exactly as it was always meant to be felt. What's interesting about phantom hearse stories is that they did not disappear when the horses did. The shape changed, of course. The old black coach became a motor car. The funeral cart became a hearse. The lonely parish road became a modern back lane, a cemetery road, a bridge or route taken late at night by someone who had no reason to expect anything stranger than their own headlights on tarmac. Yet the structure of the story remains almost exactly the same. In modern accounts, the hearse is often seen in the rearview mirror. The detail matters because a mirror already gives the experience a strange distance. The witness does not look directly at the vehicle at first. They see it behind them, framed by glass. A black car appears too close. It keeps pace. It looks old or unusually formal, or simply out of place. The driver may be difficult to see, or dressed in a way that feels wrong for the moment. Sometimes the witness pulls aside to let it pass, expecting the car to sweep by. But nothing passes. The road behind them is empty. The self-reported online account from recent years describes exactly that kind of situation. The person was travelling in a context already connected with death, taking a family headstone where it needed to go, when they noticed a black hearse-like vehicle close behind them in the mirror. It was near enough and present enough that they pulled over to let it pass. But when they looked for it, there was no vehicle there. In the same discussion, another person described seeing a similar old black car in the mirrors on the way to a grandmother's cemetery. Again, the value is not that we can prove what happened. We can't. The value is that people still reach for the same image when they are close to death. The black vehicle behind you becomes more than traffic. It becomes an omen-shaped thing, something that seems to belong to the old world, even when it appears on a modern road. Another account moves closer to the older phantom funeral tradition. One witness recalled a childhood experience near a disused cemetery, where a silent funeral party with a small coffin crossed near a bridge. At first, the figures seemed like mourners in an ordinary procession, but something about them was wrong. They made no sound. They did not behave like people moving through the living world. When the witness realised the cemetery was no longer active and turned back, the mourners had vanished. And another account from the same poster described a later incident with a girlfriend near an unused church, where a funeral procession seemed to emerge and vanish within a short distance. There are also stories that do not involve a ghostly hearse appearing on the road, but instead place strange activity around real funeral vehicles. One account from a funeral setting described a mortuary where the running water reportedly failed during a father's funeral and returned only after the hearse had left. Another from someone working in a funeral home environment described a violent impact against a locked door after the director, hearse driver, and mourners had gone, strong enough, according to the witness, to make the ground seem to vibrate. Across cultures, death often moves. It does not simply appear as a figure in a room. It comes along a road, hauled by animals, pushed by an unseen force, creaking through the night, sounding before it is seen. The vehicle may be a coach, a hearse, a cart, a wagon or funeral procession, but the meaning is close enough to recognise. Something from the boundary between life and death is travelling through the ordinary world, And if you hear it, you are closer to that boundary than you want to be.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Pacifico, the crisp Mexican lager that wasn't brewed to blend in. We were made for the moments when you live like you mean it. When you don't just hear the music, you feel it. When you let the bonfire burn into the night and find places you'd never spot on a map. So when the moment calls, choose to reach for the bright yellow can. Choose yellow. Choose Pacifico. 21 plus. Discover responsibly. Pacifico Clara Beer. Imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
So loads of spooky stuff going on there. Corpse roads have always really interested me because we have somewhere, I mean, we've got loads of corpse roads in this country, but somewhere, I can't remember the name of it now, there's this beautiful area that you can drive through from Wales, and that's going to really annoy me now because I can't remember the name of it, but it's lovely, mountainous, and there's just one road that winds all the way through it, and I'm pretty sure there's a corpse road that way, and there's someone near Hay-on-Wye. You catch it and you get onto it, you drive. It's called the God's something, the God's Pass or something like that. Anyway, I'll try and find it, but it's lovely. We've done it a couple of times. Also, that really frightened me because I just have visions of a hearse driver, a really scary old man hearse driver, stopping with all of his black suit on, and he's quite skeletal, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it's a horror film or something, but I can see this man quite clearly in his old beaten hearse, and it's really creepy.
I imagine him to look like the man out of Home Alone. No, the guy who's sweeping snow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something about it. I don't know if it's a horror film, I can't remember, but it gives me these visions and I really don't like them. They're scary.
Yeah.
Of just like you driving about late at night and this hearse pulls up beside you and this man sort of goes, "Come here." Do you know what I mean? I can't really describe it well, but it's in my brain and it does live there. Yeah? Would you like it in your brain?
Alright.
There you go. You see, you got it now. So when you're walking home late at night and you see a long dark car pulling up, beware. So lots of stuff going on. Funeral processions, that's why it's linked to the haunted episode, because it kind of spread into that. Because there's all sorts of ghostly funeral stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a funeral. You just got to scatter me somewhere.
Well, you don't want a funeral.
Nah, just go chuck me ashes out on the mountain somewhere.
I'll chuck out the window, mate.
Yeah, wherever. I'm not fussy. I'm not going to know, am I? Or if
You will, because you'll be, like, watching me.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd just be like, oh, see if I go, like, flip me out the car window.
Well, that's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed and we'll catch up with you again soon.
We will indeed. We will catch you again on Thursday for the After Dark. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.
When fighting starts, microseconds matter. Our mission-ready AI turns early intelligence into action, so our troops move first and keep the advantage. Leidos, outsmart, outdo.
Bring on the fun and bring home a new Honda.
with a great deal on your favorite Honda vehicles. And finally, take that road trip you've been dreaming of. Now's the time to check out the Honda Civic and HR-V from Honda, the 2025 Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com Best Value Brand.
Based on 2025 Consumer Choice Awards from Kelley Blue Book, visit kbb.com for more information.
You're great at protecting your data, but lots of places could still expose you to identity theft.
I thought it was safe.
If that happens, LifeLock gives you a U.S.-based restoration agent who will stick by your side from start to finish. Phone calls, filing documentation, preparing insurance claims, your agent handles it all. In fact, we're so confident restoration is guaranteed or your money back. Isn't it nice to have someone like that on your side? Save up to 30% your first year at LifeLock.com/special offer. Terms apply.
The stories told on the Whispering Woods are inspired by historical records, witness reports, and local folklore. While every effort is made to research and represent events accurately, some details, names, and locations may differ from official accounts or have been changed out of respect for those involved. These episodes are created for storytelling and entertainment purposes and should not be considered definitive fact or investigative journalism.